Are you tired of scrolling through the never-ending pile of games coming to Steam? Every Wednesday, I will dig through the pile, watch all the showcases, and read all of the press releases in search of a handful of games that you need to add to your wish list. So if you want to keep an eye on this list, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. So here are 3 games that you definitely need to add to your wish list for Wednesday, June 18th. Felt That Boxing was probably the strangest thing from Summer Game Fest, as it combines Sesame Street and Punch-Out, 2 things that the world actually needs more of. You play as unlikely hero Fuzzy, who must step into the shoes of his father, who was a boxing legend. A greedy developer is threatening to bulldoze the puppet orphanage, and he now needs to win the tournament of 1,000,000 punches to stop the puppet orphanage from being demolished. Felt That Boxing looks to go beyond a simple arcade boxer, with loads of minigames in between matches, secret moves to unlock, a story mode that will last 8 to 12 hours, and a soundtrack by Flying Lotus that evolves as fights and trainings escalate. Felt That Boxing is the Punch-Out that I didn't know I needed, and looks to fill a massive gap in the market. End of Abyss was easily the best thing that I played at Summer Game Fest, with its dark, atmospheric tone paired with its unique perspective and twin-stick controls. End of Abyss felt as much like a survival horror as it did a twin-stick shooter as it did a Metroidvania, which ultimately meant that it felt like nothing I've experienced before, and why it's my most anticipated game of 2026. End of Abyss is deeply inspired by the early NES classics Legend of Zelda and Metroid, 2 games that strongly embraced the less is more approach. Worlds that were vast, full of mystery, danger, and begged to be explored. The focus was on the exploration, non-linearity, and atmosphere. There was something so intriguing about never knowing what was around the next corner, and that is echoed in End of Abyss. The list of inspiration for End of Abyss is quite long. From outside the gaming medium, End of Abyss is inspired by Alien, Akira, The Thing, and Ghost in the Shell, just to name a few. The most prominent inspiration is easily Ridley Scott's 1979 horror film Alien. Obviously, you have a female protagonist and the retro-futuristic tech, but also just like the crew of the Nostromo who followed a distress signal in the deep reaches of space, End of Abyss follows a similar structure by investigating a distress signal that says to the one that hears this, "We are waiting for you." And although investigating distress signals has become somewhat of a sci-fi trope, it's because that device works perfectly as it taps into the core of humanity and our innate desire to help. Some games, movies, and books can sometimes have that magical ability to transport you to a magical place. Infinitesimals possesses that ability, and it transports you to Earth. However, it's from a very different perspective and a very different time, as we don't know when this game takes place, but it's safe to assume it's a long time in the future. That perspective change is basically from the ground, as you play as extraterrestrial Captain Ocney, who looks very similar to a grasshopper and also happens to be of a similar size as well. Which means that in addition to the mechanical sentinels who occupy planet Earth, you're also going to have to deal with the wildlife. Things like ants, spiders, and birds are very big threats, but for the most part, you have the option to avoid them if you choose. Movement felt incredible, as you can traverse huge distances with your jetpack. The visuals are stunning thanks to some talented artists and Unreal Engine 5, and the world has a very epic feel all the way down to the John Williams inspired score. After a catastrophic crash, Captain Ocney and the rest of his elite squadron have been split up. You need to regroup and survive this hostile planet. What was very impressive was how much freedom was offered to the player to approach each level and mission as they wanted to, kind of like Deus Ex or Dishonored. You have plenty of tools, and if you want to fully operate in stealth, you will have those options, but you also are heavily armed and can go in blasting, which felt incredible as well. The mini-bosses at the end of my demo look to pose a rather large threat. However, I recently found a handful of RPG rounds. Remembering this, I made very quick work of the enemy forces, only to discover the real boss was coming in behind them. Let me know in the comments below if you plan to add any of these to your wish list. That's all for today, but until next time, be good to your fellow gamer, but more importantly, be better to your fellow human.